Welcome back to Achillea, the art of storytelling. Tales told from a wooden Bauwagen in Brandenburg, Germany. Today's story I dedicate to Ra. Welcome to the world. Today's story doesn't come from Brandenburg or from Germany. No, it comes from Asia. I found it in a book of traditional folk tales from Vietnam, from Laos, from Cambodia, and from Korea. And like all stories, or many stories from that part of the world, it has a slight Zen or Buddhistic philosophy behind it, which means that the listener, at the end of the story, will have to work out for themselves quite what was going on. It's the story of a young man who had a philosophy. And his philosophy was, why should I bother working, making an effort, when everything that I need will just fall into my lap? Which is all well and good if you don't have many responsibilities, but if you do, then it doesn't work like that. Responsibilities such as a wife and 2 children. One day, the man's wife came to him and said, "Man, go into the kitchen. Go and look in the cupboards. You will see that there is not much food in the cupboards. In fact, there's hardly any. Our children will soon starve if you don't find some food. I myself haven't eaten a proper meal for over 2 weeks just so that you and the children can eat well. You are going to have to go out and find some food." Well, put like that, the young man had no choice, so off he went. Down to the market, where he usually went to find food. And there he would lean against a tree and watch and wait. Watch and wait to see which of the market traders were about to throw something away, like an old cabbage or an old carrot that couldn't be sold any longer because it was almost rotten. Or the egg seller who had some cracked eggs that he couldn't sell and would throw them away otherwise. Sometimes he would go to the cheese seller and he would get the rough, hard ends of cheese. Whichever way, he always found some food. One day he found a chicken that somebody had forgotten, running around, so he took it back to his family. But today wasn't market day. So to find some food he had to go farther afield. Following a country lane, he came out of the town and into the forests at the foot of the mountain. Coming into a clearing in the mountain, he saw, opposite him, carved into the side of the mountain, the statue of Buddha. But this wasn't any ordinary statue of Buddha. It was huge. It was enormous. It was the biggest statue of Buddha he'd ever seen. He stood in front of it and he was breathtaking. He looked at it and thought, goodness me, what a thing. Extraordinary. And then he noticed that at the top of the Buddha, on its head, in fact, growing out of its head, was a tree. An apple tree. For some bird had obviously eaten an apple, and while standing on top of the Buddha, and the seed had fallen into the crack, and out of it had grown a tree. On the end of one branch of that tree was one apple, but it was also huge, ginormous. And he took one look at that and thought, if I could get hold of that apple, my children would be fed for a week. But how to get it? The only way he was going to get that apple was to climb up the Buddha and get it himself. Well, that's what he did. He climbed up onto the big toe of the Buddha, which wasn't easy. The big toe of the Buddha was as big as he was. Sitting on the toenail of the Buddha, he looked back and thought, ooh, this is a long way up. And that's even further. He started to scramble up the inside of the leg of the Buddha, up the thigh, and came to the first problem, the belly of the Buddha. It was huge. How am I going to get past that belly? But luckily it was an old Buddha, and there were lots of wrinkles on its belly, so he could grab hold of one wrinkle and pull himself up to the next, and then up to the next, and then up to the next, until finally he got to the top of the belly of the Buddha. The next bit wasn't so difficult because there was something to hold on to. He grabbed hold of a nipple and pulled himself up until he was sitting here in this hollow at the bottom of the neck of the Buddha. The chin wasn't so easy, but once again there were some wrinkles to hold on to and a very big hanging earlobe. He took a rest in the bottom lip of the Buddha. He didn't dare look back down again, it was such a long way. Instead he looked up and found his next problem. If the belly was big of the Buddha, the nose was enormous. And how was he going to get up past that nose? He tried scrambling up one side, slipped back down again, and had it not have been for the lip of the Buddha, he would have fallen. He tried scrambling up the other side and fell back down again. So he lay there in the bottom lip of the Buddha and looked up and tried to work out how to get up, and that's when he saw that the nostrils were hollow. Indeed, the nostrils were hollow and led right up inside the head of the Buddha, which was also hollow. He could see the roots of the tree growing through. And he thought if the roots of the tree were growing through, then surely there must be a way to get out. So he started to scramble up inside the nose of the Buddha. He went up the right nostril. It was rough in there, but he managed to scramble up, and he pulled himself up. It was getting thinner and thinner, but he pulled himself up inside. He could see the big cavity inside him with the roots, and he was almost there when all of a sudden he noticed that everything was beginning to shake. The whole mountainside was shaking. Everything was shaking. It was shuddering. It was like an earthquake. And then all of a sudden there was an explosion. Boom! And he flew out of the nose of the Buddha, and he bounced off the bottom lip, off the chin, off the belly, off the knee, and plam, landed on the floor. Lying there, he looked back. The Buddha was shaking. The tree was shaking. The branch was shaking. The apple was shaking, and it shook itself off. Rolled down the head of the Buddha, off the nose, and boom, landed right on his lap. Ha! You see? And he picked it up and started to walk. Before he left the clearing, he turned around and looked at the Buddha and said, "Bless you."